Let's reveal the bids from Hikaru and Magnus. Look at that! Hikaru has been 8 minutes and 59 seconds, beaten by 1 second. And this is Hikaru's reaction when that bid came in with 8 minutes and 58 seconds. Needs a draw to win the match.
I can't believe what we just saw. Winning the bid by 1 second, and this just shows how well the two players know each other.
I'm a bit shocked. I'm a bit gobsmacked. Having less than 9 minutes against Hikaru Nakamura, having a 6-minute deficit, and the black pieces, it's not going to be easy. It is Magnus, of course, but I think we'll see some serious flagging if Hikaru can't win on the position, which is quite likely, quite possible.
Hikaru has to win on demand. He's got the white pieces. He's up on the clock by a big margin. Magnus Carlsen needs just to draw. And the moment you say that sentence, it's kind of... It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that you can fight this.
He wants to be a dirty flagger. He wants to win on the clock, not on the board. I mean, you look at the position. Black has everything under control. What Hikaru is relying on is lead on the clock. He just wants to keep the position as ambiguous as possible.
Yep, no trades, no exchanges, no clarification of the position. He's just trying to force Magnus to go into the tank at some point, which is guaranteed to happen, and only later maybe put him under pressure on the board. King's Indian player on the attack, and he's got the same position with the white.
To beat the bots on the Internet Chess Club. So here in this game, he's not a bot, he's only human, but he plays like a bot most of the time. Magnus Carlsen, only 8 minutes on the clock, no pieces have been traded.
When you're in the Armageddon, when you're up on the clock, you've got to play the clock as much as the position. And look at Hikaru. This is when he's going to make Magnus think.
White's light squared bishop, which is a problem piece, can also activate, there we go, on a nicer diagonal now for Hikaru. The time differential here is increasing, if anything, in Hikaru's favor.
If we get king and rook versus king and rook, which is an obvious draw, Hikaru Nakamura will try to flag him. So Magnus, he needs to keep his eye on the clock. He needs to play quickly every single turn.
And David, you've been talking about that white bishop on h3. One plan that black has to follow up with the trades would be to move the queen ahead and then to defend that bishop coming to e6.
I'm surprised he's gone for it so quickly, Hikaru, because finally there is a trade. Finally, black's job here, or at least the next few moves, have become clearer. They have become more obvious. White's king at some point will take a timeout, shuffle to the corner, and realign his rooks. But it's not the king that uses the corner, it's the knight. What a flexible move.
If we can
the knight.
bring up an analysis where f5, this is a thematic pawn sacrifice. You throw your knight to e4, you control all of the squares in the position, and you have an attack. I don't know if it would have worked out.
White's position in general, at least the chances of a longer game.
It just feels like it's easier to play with white. The moves that you're suggesting are appearing on the board. David, he takes the queen out, expecting the bishop to come out, the rook to come out to a better square. And at some point, Hikaru will strike down the board with h5 because you really don't want to trade the bishop for the knight. He just first sidesteps with that king to h1. He needs to be prepared to respond with that. Magnus immediately plays the move bishop e6.
Sorry, this f5 break will become very relevant. Black can open it on his own terms, but let's go back. Tanya, you predicted the future this time, and this is the current position. f5 on the board.
White might have to make the decision to push that e-pawn, and he does it. It's e5, the bishop on e7, and now this h4 weakness suddenly appears out of nowhere.
Moves, and then Hikaru can play for her. That is why Magnus took this pawn on h5. That is a huge decision by him because it opens up his own king if it gets pinned. So black can start taking control of the G and H files, and that's why Hikaru says, no, you can keep that pawn there. It's sort of an umbrella for my king.
It's a question to Magnus. How do you consolidate? How do you set up a defensive wall? The black king, white's rooks are coming for it, and okay, he chooses to slide his rook across.
Pawn on f5, h5, h7, all of them are weak. Currently, black was a pawn up. I was going to say is, but Hikaru snaps up that h5 pawn, and that's a big blunder.
Yes, because there's a tactic. I mean, I would not have seen it without the evaluation, but knight takes pawn on e5. That is a game changer, because once the pawn takes the knight on the square, the queen slides up one with check, and then the rook slides from g6 to h6. No matter what white does, he's going to lose his queen. So if Magnus Carlsen spots knight takes e5...
Oh, he doesn't find it. He moves his knight away. Same threat, but it would have been more effective to capture a pawn in the process. You would have been winning on the spot.
Isn't black's f5 pawn hanging? Random question.
It is. The white knight can go and take that pawn. Okay, he doesn't. Hikaru Nakamura stepping back. That move shows that he really is nervous. He does allow black to grab a pawn now. Magnus a pawn up.
It's a little bit deep. He knows objectively maybe it's not the right choice, but he needs to win this game. White king is in huge danger.
Yeah, simply the king has to go back. If the king goes the other way, then you drop the bishop in with the deadly check. So the king has to move, another check, And another check, and no way out. It would have been a draw. So Hikaru, that's why he was shaking his head.
And we were a little critical about Magnus missing knight e5, and now I'm just wondering if this was part of the bigger plan, that he knew that knight f5, he had calculated his way through, knowing that it ends in a repetition. He ends up with an extra pawn, and wow, we've got a lot of trades that have happened. That cannot be good news for Hikaru.
Can't be good news. The queens are off the board as well.
Did see him react, though, maybe realizing he has missed an opportunity in this game, but he only needs a draw, Magnus, to win the match.
Magnus, has he lost control? Suddenly Hikaru, he's hustling. He's just trying to pose difficult questions to his opponent. If you can't go and take that black A-pawn, maybe push the white A-pawn. Just hint that you're going to promote it later. Okay, we see a trade of knights getting rid of the very strong black knight, but every piece that disappears from the board, every trade, guides Magnus closer to that draw. Still big questions to be answered. Okay, he does put his pawn on a safe square, but it's not going to be safe for too long. White's rook will go after it eventually. There we go.
Hikaru making decisions that keeps the game going, and that's the key to this Armageddon. Look at him just pursuing that pawn. Magnus moves it one more step ahead, and now the bishop comes back to attack it, and I think he's creating his chances. If that A passer is on the board, it's game on.
Given the circumstances.
Guys, we've got to mention, the whole day Magnus's air quality has been great, but as the pressure has increased, his air quality has got worse and worse and worse, and that might be affecting his play. Magnus, he's just playing too slowly right now. If he had better air quality, maybe he would be a bit faster, and every second counts at this level. The margins are so small.
Use the king to protect the bishop, and then bring his rook d8 to d4 and go after the c-pawn. We did see Magnus just bring his rook to d8 after Hikaru stole a pawn. So Magnus's plan is now clear.
Yeah, 2 minutes. So on the board, he's fine, but is the clock going to tell the decisive factor here? I think you can jump in. There we go. The black rook has landed. Not just is this pawn up for grabs, the pawn behind it. And white has to bank everything on this passed pawn. You have to run it through somehow. You have to break the blockade, somehow evict this black bishop, kick it away, and somehow cause some problems for the black king. But on the board, it definitely looks like Magnus is in full control.
He's down material. That is terrible news for someone who needs to win this game.
Yeah, he needs to win it, but actually he should be the one defending. Look at the evaluation bar dropping down in black's favour. Those are two runners, those two black pawns. They're going to cost white some material.
And there's no stopping them. And we see Hikaru there. He is worried about his position, but he's still, wow, what just happened?
Things are turning again. This will happen a lot throughout this time scramble, but the black pawns are running. They look quicker. Two normally run slower than one, but those two connected pass pawns are so close to becoming queens. Hikaru looks devastated. Hikaru looks like he's actually ready to resign almost. All you need to do is Magnus step some pawns forward. If you don't get flagged, you're guaranteed to win this Armageddon.
And now we have kind of a blitz game where it's about even on the clock and Magnus only needs a draw. And we saw the bar go about level, but I think the reason that it wasn't actually equal is because a draw is bad for Hikaru. It might have been a forced draw, and he can't have any part of that.
Yeah, Hikaru is simply a pawn down now. Neither of those pawns became queens, but it did come at the cost of more trades, more exchanges. And look at this classy move from Magnus. He's just trying to swap things off. He's now managed to get rid of the bishops, rid of a set of pawns. And Hikaru, is he going to try and flag Magnus? The answer is no, it's a draw. Magnus takes this Armageddon and the match.
And believe it or not, Hikaru is actually the one who offered a draw. That's the ultimate sign of respect. He wasn't going to try to flag somebody he was 10 seconds behind on the clock against. That is a good show of sportsmanship.
Wow.
We see a big smile on Magnus Carlsen's face and Hikaru shaking his head. The big match is over. Magnus Carlsen wins the winner finals with a draw in Armageddon. Hikaru Nakamura, what a fight he gave it. But he had to win in the Armageddon with a draw. It means he loses the winner's final. What do you think is going through his head right now, Robert?
Disappointment, but I do think that Magnus played the better chess between the two. It was close, but I think that when we had this final game set up, Magnus was never really in trouble over the board. So Hikaru probably upset he didn't maximize some of his chances. It just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.